ChatGPT is incredible for some things, and for other things, it kind of completely falls apart. So it's not the AI. The AI itself is great. It's the container that's the problem. You start a conversation, you're bouncing ideas back and forth, and somewhere along the way, the conversation becomes work. It starts generating, schemas or prompts, decisions, files, a bunch of information. And all of that kind of gets buried in your chat that you'll never successfully scroll back through. As an example, here I started a conversation with ChatGPT, and it was just an idea. I want to shoot a video about how hard it is to use ChatGPT to keep track of conversations and files and things of that nature. Okay, that started off as a kind of a gentle conversation and quickly turned into here's some topics that you might want to cover, here's an outline, here's some very interesting concepts. And I started saying, well, that sounds really good. Keep track of that. That's an interesting one. And really very quickly, before you knew it, this conversation started to turn into something that started to look like work. And what I mean by that is the conversation turned into something that started producing artifacts, files, something that I want to be able to get back to. Now, we've all seen this. I have a huge conversation list here trying to kind of ideate with ChatGPT, which it is fantastic at. But the moment that I start thinking, okay, now I want to keep track of a couple of the things we've talked about, and I want to have more conversations about that, I don't have great ways. ChatGPT has certainly given us ways to fork the conversation at a certain point. That doesn't entirely help, and I don't have ways to kind of capture versions and tell which one's which. I can't go back to the one right before we introduced this idea that I no longer like and continue the conversation from there, or erase an idea altogether that was earlier in the conversation, but I want to keep everything else. This turns into a big mess. This is absolutely not what these tools are made for. They're terrible at this. Here's what I'm going to show you today. First, how I work. A way I use AI where the work actually stays, where you can find it, version it, and come back to it. Second, some example projects, things that might make you think of your own work. We'll look at managing a video script, tracking birthday gifts for your kids, and even organizing taxes. These are just examples to get you kind of thinking and realizing this is for anything. Third, the boss move. How to turn any of these folders into a system, something that knows the rules and can guide you through a workflow without you having to remember everything every time. And finally, the hero move. How to go beyond that and create something like an open agent system where the AI knows when to use different skills depending on what you ask for. It sounds like a lot. It's really not. Before I drop in here, let me level set. If you're new to this, I'm about to use some tools that are traditionally used for coding. You can use any of these tools, Cursor, Codex, whatever. Many have a free tier that you can try. The point is, it's a tool that can read, write, edit, and manage files. And that's really it. That's what we're using them for. And one more thing, use a thinking model. Use something with power. Don't try to shortchange yourself with a lightweight model unless you want file management only. But if you want AI as a real partner for ideation, you want it to be as smart as it can be. So use a better model in these cases. All right, let me show you where we're going. All right, down here, all I've done is created a folder called Video Project for the project, the example that we're working on here. And I've created two empty folders, one input and output. Those are not required. I'm just going to use that as clear separation so you can see this kind of working. What I'm going to do is drop a file into the input folder called the idea. And this idea, if we looked at it, is just kind of a conversation that I have out loud, what I call a walk, which is me thinking through an idea and saying, here's what I want to build. Here's some ideas. I kind of want to build this and talk about that. I think this is what's important. Capture it all together. It creates basically a context seeding file. What I will do then is I am now in my terminal application. I am going to use Claude Code, which is a terminal application in this case. And if I type in Claude here, then I'm inside of this video project. I can tell it to read the idea file and tell me where we are. And this is the way of contextualizing this agent, if you will. So, okay, from here, I'm going to move on to one more thing, just a little bit more complicated so that you can see the files along with me. And it's really the way I typically work. So give me 1 second. Okay, so I've opened up Cursor, can be Visual Studio Code, can be anything. You don't really need to do this. This is for our benefit so that we can both talk to the agent as well as see the files that it's creating, it's a little bit more obvious. So you can see we have the input folder and the file that we were in. What I'm going to do is open up Claude Code here and pretty much ask it the exact same question. So this is no different than using it in Terminal. I'm just using them next to each other. All right. With that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to contextualize with our idea file at this point. This is not a pattern I'm saying you should follow. This is just for example, but it really is kind of a way that I start almost every time I start one of these projects. I lay down some ideas for the project, generally by voice. It's the way that I prefer to do it. And that becomes a context file until I create a new context file. Okay. And so we've gone back and forth, and here I came up with a pretty good outline. We've been working back and forth, and we have a pretty good outline. I might say, okay, I like this one. I want to capture this outline. Let's capture this as our V1 and keep moving forward. Excellent. And now it's created a V1 file. This is always here for us. I can always come back. Let's say I came back the next day and had a new context when I walked in. I could say orient using the outline file that we have so far. And if I felt like the outline didn't even have quite enough, I could say also include the idea file. Okay, so now we're completely recontextualized specifically with the elements that I want. So at this point, if I was to say something like, can you come up with maybe 5 different ways to tell this story? Give me ideas, kind of a few that are ridiculous and a few that are just very bog standard, if you don't mind. Okay, and so it is doing some of the ideation that I might do with it, kind of just throwing things at the wall to say, do you want the straight tutorial, the heist movie, evolution timeline, the cooking show, the intervention. So all of these are, well, some of them are a little bit insane, but okay, neat ideas. Let's just say that I didn't want to lose any of these, but I don't want them to pollute my outline. Remember, now in my context, I have the outline and all of these crazy ideas. If I was in ChatGPT, this is when I start wandering into that place that it's really difficult to separate them. So I might say, outstanding, do you mind writing these ideas into an idea file, kind of a variant file? And then per idea, if you would write an outline for each one of those ideas as a file, that'd be great. So these systems, these coding systems, Claude Code in this case, are excellent at working over multiple steps in in kind of a sequence that you ask it to do, and creating multiple files and reading in multiple files at different times. So this is not a, I have one file, I want you to change one line kind of operation. I can now really create a lot of different contexts all at once using my assistant here to do a lot of that heavy lifting. Okay, and so now we have all of these different outlines. We have all of the story variants that we had, and I kind of like the heist movie one. So let's create a new context, again, as if I came back the next day, or I just wanted to have a clean context to have this conversation. This is literally how I work. I would say something like, I need to read in the idea file and in the heist movie file. And so that's recontextualizing it and giving it instructions of, let's talk about the different options that we might take with this. Now I'm having a focused conversation about any of the parts that I choose at any time. Okay, so the point is where you're having conversations matters. Because now you're managing files, you're versioning them, orienting context intentionally, instead of hopping around in chat and hoping that it doesn't collapse. It's just a folder, and the folder is a massive improvement over a chat window. Okay, let me show you some other projects that might make you think of your own work. Again, these are just examples. You can do literally anything with this. I just wanted to show some kind of breadth here. So say you're tracking birthday gifts for your kids. You've got 3 kids, each one has their own folder in here. Inside of each folder is a profile that will have their name, their avatar, some interesting information about them, personality. Each one is dated so you can see exactly what they wanted at different times in these current interests. And you also would have maybe a wish list for the things that they're interested in at a given time. So every time they tell you some of the things they're interested in, you might come in and add a file that says this is what they were interested in at each time, because, you know, kids tend to grow up. So this would be kind of dated. That dating actually helps quite a bit when you're working with these files. Okay, so I come back to the project and the first thing I ask it is, who has a birthday coming up and what should I buy? And of course, what does it have to say? It says, I don't have access to your contacts calendar or any information about the people in your life, so I can't tell you who has a birthday coming up. So Obviously, it has problems understanding everything about my life or even the files that are entirely available to it in this system because it's just a folder still. Before we step into making this much, much better, let me show you a different project as well. So here I am in a folder where I might manage my taxes, and I might do previous year's taxes in a folder like 2024. All of the things in the input folder were the things that I had received, information like the W-2, the 1099, those kinds of things that you might need to keep track of course. And you can see I have 2 employers that I need to keep track of these W-2s. And at the end of the year was an output for the tax return summary. The next year, 2025, same kind of thing. We have some information inside of here and no output yet because we need to work on those taxes. What I want to be able to do is come here and say, am I ready to fill my taxes for 2025 yet? But of course, it's not going to know the answer to that because it's just a folder. What it needs is some context to what it's supposed to do. It doesn't know what kind of system it is. It's just a bunch of files right now. Okay, so let's come back and take a look at the kids' gifts folder again, where we have all of our kids and the gifts we want to give them, and say that a system, this boss move that I'm talking about, it's time to move into it. This system is actually just a folder that has some understanding of what's inside of it and how it works. So we're just trying to give the agent some rules that it can follow, that it knows what it's supposed to do when we ask it questions. Right now it has nothing. So in Claude Code, there's a file that is a common file called Claude MD. And so in this Claude MD, you can put anything that you want. And once you save this file, any questions that you have, it will use that information. So every time you create a new context, it's going to read that Claude MD file as the first piece of context. That's what's inside of its memory every single time. That's an important file. This can be an Agents MD file or a Gemini MD file. There's different names depending upon the application that you're using or the coding agent that you're using, but they're all really the same kind of pattern. It's what do we first put into our memory, into our conversational history, essentially, before we start any conversation. And you can see it's calling me Bob. And by the way, my name's not Bob. Why is it calling me Bob? My name's Matt. Okay, and so here, really quickly, we won't read through all this. This is quite a bit, and it's just an example. I wanted to show this might be a Claude file that you put into your gift giving folder. And it's kind of, here's the structure of the application. You'll see that we use kids with their name inside of it as folders. Each child has a folder. The profile MD is the child's info, birthday, current interests. We save things with a year, month, kind of wish list, dated wish list name, and you've seen these files here. So we're really just building kind of knowledge of the system so that it understands what to find, where to look, what files it might need to go search through when we're asking certain kinds of questions. And it says, when asked about gifts, read the relevant child's profile, current interests, things like that. Here's the gift occasion calendar. These are the different birthdays. Those could also just as easily be in the profile. If you learn something new, if the user mentions new interests or preferences, offer to update that child's profile with the new information and a date stamp. Should I add getting into chess January 2025 to Oliver's profile? So this is just extra rules that say, as someone's interacting with you in this system, what do we do with the new information so that they don't have to keep updating these files by hand? So let's use this for a second and find out if there's any gifts that we need to buy. Okay, new context so that it definitely picks up that information and say, who has a birthday coming up and what should I buy? All right, it says based on the calendar, Oliver's birthday's coming up on March 15th, less than 2 months away. He's turning 10. Let me check his profile, recent wish lists, and purchase history to give you a good recommendation. So now it's actually working for me. This is keeping track of a lot of things. This might be software that we would have written in the past, but as long as you put these rules in here and turn this into a system in the way that you want to work, it will read through the files that you want it to read through. It will write the files that you want it writing in the locations that you want it writing when you want them. This really actually changes everything. And well, let's try this extra instruction that we have. Hands off, I don't want to do anything. It turns out this year, Oliver got really interested in horticulture. Can you take a note about that? This might be the way that you keep your lists up to date and everything else. You don't necessarily need to walk into any of these files yourself to do the work. Done getting interested in horticulture. January 2026 actually opens up some great birthday gift ideas. Kids gardening kit, seed starter kit, butterfly garden or terrarium. So perfect. Right? This is outstanding. It's not only the things that were on his list, it's also new ideas that might spark a conversation. This is the whole point. This is why we want to use this stuff. And obviously back in the tax system, same kind of thing. I can ask it, am I ready to fill my 2025 taxes yet? And it tells me, here's your document status, W-2 from Tech Corp, some receipts, it's missing a 1099 NEC, freelance consulting, you're waiting for this, etc., etc. So it knows my business. I've put information in my Claude MD as to what it should be concerned about, what it needs to think about, where the pointers are, where I might post my stuff, information about the URL just to my bank website so I know how to easily get to that. Those kinds of things are all in my notes. And now this system has access to them. It's worth mentioning, obviously, we're in taxes and everything else. Use your own sensitivity to how much information you want AI or something like that consuming. It may be used for training in some models. That's worth mentioning. If you're worried about these things, stay away. This is just an example. Okay, one last thing. Let's have a little bit of fun just to show that what we're in is a coding system and it can do some very interesting stuff. We are just using examples of keeping track of files and information and ideation, but it can actually absolutely work on your data. If you have spreadsheet data or PDFs or slide decks that you need to consume or meeting notes or anything else, and you need to create reports out of those things, this is fantastic at that. So I'm going to give it a very simple rule in that Claude MD file, that starting file that we have that says when we produce a gift recommendation, create a little report for the kid. Give me some gift recommendations for Oliver. All right. Some very interesting things, the telescope, kid gardening terrarium kit, chess set. So it picked up the horticulture and everything else. And then it finished by saying, should I create the report in output? I told it yes. It created an output folder and is going to write out Oliver's report. And here's our report. So Oliver, maybe I forgot to mention, this can be off-putting for people that meet me. My kids are kind of frog people. I know. A little bit strange. And there's the report that we get of all of the things. You know, we want to avoid certain things, more Lego sets, just got Porsche for Christmas, has tons, needs a break. Great, very interesting report, right? Now here's the thing about what we just did. Those instructions that Claude MD, those instructions are universal. They're always there. Every conversation reads them, and that's fine for simple systems. But what happens when you have a lot of rules, a lot of different things that the system can do and different angles that you want it to take? You don't want all of that context loaded into one thing every single time, right? This is the same ChatGPT problem. And you don't want it to be locked into just one mode. You want to be able to set it up so that it can do different things. This is where you go from a system to something more like an open agent system, something that I call as open agent system. And it's simpler than it sounds. This is the hero move. Okay, I won't go too far into this one because this is getting pretty extra, but the way that I do this happens to be the project for the video that you're watching. When I shoot a video, I start one of these, you can see my input, I record different walks. All of those walks are those ideation files that I was telling you about that I just kind of walk around and talk. That's being captured here. These are all the different ideas. And then what I do with those is I come into Claude Code or whatever builder system that I'm using at the time and start having conversations in the exact same way that we've seen. However, what I have inside of my system is a bunch of different rule files. So these are the different instructions and the things that it can do. It can do a critique or a brainstorm or detail, or where it gives me the titles and thumbnails. It can describe the video itself. It can write a full script. It can do a script outline. I have a researcher that can go do extra research for me. An interviewer, it can write variants. We've seen that. So let's take an example here and run one of these and say, using Walk03, run the titler. And so what it does is it reads Walk03, of course, and then it also goes and finds the instruction for the video titler itself, reads in the instructions, the video titler, the channel strategy document. There's a whole bunch of rules on how it should integrate with all of these different instructions in the system, and then it will run the titler action itself. And here we go. What am I supposed to say? The $20 setup that replaced ChatGPT Pro. Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm not saying it's always gold. These are just ideas. In the end, the neat thing about this is you're the part of the process that actually matters. So all I wanted to show is there's a way to go even farther and not have it all crowd your Claude code right away. I have something that says if we look at the core instructions file really briefly, it says if someone is asking about the metadata, titles, and descriptions, maybe you should use the video detailer, which is this object right here. So it's just an instruction file, and this is inside of essentially the Claude file saying, when somebody talks about this, go read that file and run it. This is how skills work. This is just another definition for skills. I just started writing these before skills came out. So it's really the exact same pattern. But I thought you'd be interested in seeing how far you can go. And this one has tons and tons of different, essentially, agents that can do different kinds of work for me. I think one of the important things to point out here is this is not having AI do all of your work. This is working alongside AI. AI is not writing these scripts. It's not coming up with ideas. It's not picking the titles, thank goodness. That isn't its job. Its job is to help and kind of record things, re-ingest things, contextualize things, organize things, but also create things that I'm asking it to create for ideation. In this system, in this environment, I am the sunshine. I am the thing that's putting life into the entire system. Let me tie this all back together. If you remember, we started in ChatGPT, we had conversations that were becoming work. They started creating artifacts. Those artifacts were buried in chat. Context was starting to collapse because you couldn't figure out how to take different parts of the conversation and just talk about that. And versions would just absolutely disappear within this big, huge chat history. So step one, use a folder. Use a coding agent, Claude Code, Cursor, whatever, as a conversational agent that saves files. Artifacts become real things that you can see and find. That was easy, right? I advise doing that. That already is a huge step. But step two, turn it into a system and add some instructions in something like the ClaudeMD file. Rules for how the folder should work, and now you don't have to kind of re-explain yourself and kind of orient the system every single time you come in. But let's go even further. Step three, the hero move. Separate those rules into skills and load what you need when you need it. Build something that thinks along with you. Listen, I'm not saying this is the future of AI. I'm not saying everyone should work this way. But right now, today, if you want to use AI for real project work, the kind that spans multiple sessions and produces a bunch of artifacts, this is actually what works. A folder, an agent, some rules, and you providing the intent. Pick one project, try it once, see if the artifacts feel more real when they're files, see if the hunting stops. And if it clicks, start building your system. You are the sunshine. Go shine on something. If this video was useful for you, please subscribe. I make videos about AI workflows and how to actually use these tools for real work. Thanks for coming along for the ride on this one, and I'll see you in the next one.